In clinical practice, the duodenojejunal flexure marks the precise anatomical border where the upper digestive tract ends and the lower begins. Any hemorrhage originating below this specific junction falls into a massive, twisting diagnostic territory known as a lower gastrointestinal bleed. The severity of these bleeds is highly variable. They can manifest as occult or hidden losses of as little as 10 milliliters of blood per day, requiring sensitive chemical stool tests to detect. Conversely, rapid, severe bleeding can destabilize a patient's circulation within minutes. In these cases, physicians must often administer 2 or more units of blood through transfusion just to achieve hemodynamic stability. Because the condition can escalate from a microscopic leak to a life-threatening hemorrhage, locating the exact point of vascular failure is the immediate priority for the medical team. Before deploying advanced scanners, the primary screening method is the physical appearance and history of the blood loss. Black, tarry blood, known as melena, indicates that the source is positioned higher in the tract, typically within the small intestine. If the output is dark red, it suggests the failure is located within the colon, specifically the ascending, transverse, descending, or sigmoid regions. This chart shows how the color of the blood correlates to the depth of the lesion. While dark red indicates a colonic source, bright red blood, especially if it spatters during defecation, points directly to the anal canal. Pain provides a further diagnostic filter. Conditions located above Hilton's line, the internal boundary of the anal canal, are generally painless. If the patient is in acute pain, the search focuses on lower, external lesions, like fissures. This initial analysis narrows the search radius, but confirming the exact site of the leak requires direct visualization of the intestinal wall. The first technological step is to clear the bowel and deploy endoscopes. Using proctoscopy, sigmoidoscopy, or a full colonoscopy, doctors send a high-definition camera into the lower tract. This direct line of sight helps the medical team identify 95% of common local lesions, such as polyps, inflammatory colitis, or tumors. Once the bleeding source is visible, doctors can deploy electrocautery, laser ablation, or apply metallic hemoclips to mechanically stop the flow. However, a complication arises when the bowel is prepped and the colonoscopy appears completely normal, yet the patient continues to lose blood. When surface-level optics fail, the medical team shifts focus from the lining of the intestine to the circulatory system itself. To find hidden or intermittent leaks, the hospital moves to nuclear scintigraphy. In this procedure, a patient's red blood cells are tagged with a radioactive isotope and re-injected. Because these cells remain in the vessels for several hours, repeat scans can catch the moment an intermittent bleed restarts. This chart compares standard blood flow to the detection threshold of the scan. The technique is sensitive enough to identify active bleeding at a rate as low as 0.1 milliliters per minute. For bleeds occurring at a slightly faster rate of 0.5 milliliters per minute, the team escalates to selective angiography. A catheter is threaded into the mesenteric arteries to inject contrast dye. On the X-ray, the site of the hemorrhage is revealed by the glowing dye escaping the vessel and pooling in the intestine. If anatomical scans find no localized leak, the medical team checks for systemic failures, such as liver failure or blood dyscrasias, which prevent proper clotting. By transitioning from cameras to isotopes and contrast dyes, the search moves from the surface of the tissue into the chemistry of the blood itself. Treatment protocols run on 2 simultaneous tracks, resuscitating the patient from shock through fluid replacement while executing a targeted strike on the bleeding site. The angiography used for diagnosis becomes the primary treatment tool. Radiologists can now inject embolic material, like tiny coils or particles, directly into the specific artery that is leaking. This chart shows the effectiveness of the embolization process. The procedure successfully stops the hemorrhage in 70%. The efficiency of these protocols lies in their ability to transition from a diagnostic scan to a life-saving intervention within a single procedure. Despite these advancements, a small percentage of patients suffer from obscure bleeding that remains invisible to every scan and scope. When every diagnostic and interventional tool fails, the final therapeutic option is a blind subtotal colectomy, the surgical removal of most of the large intestine to stop the unidentified leak. The pathway to this decision involves an escalation from analyzing physical symptoms to the use of nuclear tracers and arterial embolization. What was once an untraceable and often fatal event is now managed as a solvable mechanical failure, corrected through a systematic hierarchy of medical technology.
After discussing lower GI bleeding, now we shall discuss anal tumors, benign and malignant.
The human anal canal is a complex crossroads of tissue types. This diagram highlights 3 distinct zones: the outer perianal region, the dentate line in the middle, and the transitional zone above it. Because this region is so biologically active, it is susceptible to a wide range of growths that all announce themselves through the same vague symptoms: itching and minor bleeding. If we zoom in on the perianal region, we can see the baseline for these symptoms: Condyloma acuminata, or anal warts. Driven by a highly infectious filterable virus, these present as soft, outward-growing papillary masses. The tissue underneath remains pliable, and the infection can range from a few isolated bumps to an extensive mass that physically occludes the canal. Because the virus remains localized to the surface, treatment for small warts is typically limited to chemical destruction. Clinicians apply a 25% podophyllin solution or bichloroacetic acid directly to the tissue to burn the growths away. When the masses become extensive, they require surgical excision. However, because the recurrence rate for these viral infections is 60%, surgery is often paired with immunotherapy, using an autogenous vaccine, to help the body prevent the warts from returning. While warts are benign, they share a nearly identical symptomatic profile with invasive cancers. Itching and bleeding are present in both, and visual inspection alone cannot always distinguish a viral growth from a malignancy. This makes thorough histological examination through multiple biopsies an absolute clinical necessity to rule out squamous cell carcinoma. Moving into malignancies, the first point on the spectrum is basal cell carcinoma. Usually originating near the dentate line, these tumors are relatively low-grade and rarely spread to the lymph nodes. If caught early, they can often be managed with localized irradiation, though larger masses require full surgical excision. This diagram maps the most common malignant threat: epidermoid carcinoma. Vectors below the dentate line show squamous cell carcinomas. Vectors above indicate transitional cell carcinomas. Presenting as a hardened ulcer, it invades downward into mucosal layers, causing persistent rectal bleeding. For small tumors that have not yet reached the muscular layer, a wide local excision is the standard approach. This requires the surgeon to remove the tumor along with a strict 2.5 centimeter margin of healthy tissue, ensuring no cancerous cells remain at the edges. More advanced cases require an abdominoperineal resection, which involves the removal of the rectum and surrounding perineal tissue. If the cancer has spread to the inguinal nodes, surgeons must also perform a radical dissection of the groin to remove compromised glands. This 6-week timeline maps combined therapy for advanced cases. On day 1, patients begin a 3-week radiation block alongside intravenous mitomycin C. On days 28 and 31, heavy doses of 5-FU are administered, shrinking the tumor significantly before surgery 4 to 6 weeks later. Successful treatment of epidermoid carcinoma relies on this multidisciplinary orchestration. By using a precisely timed sequence of chemotherapy and radiation, clinicians can weaken the malignancy before the first incision is ever made. At the furthest end of the malignant spectrum is melanoma. These arise from the epidermoid lining and feature a high degree of systemic aggression. While relatively rare, the anal canal is the 3rd most common site for these tumors in the body, following the skin and the eyes. A significant diagnostic difficulty with these tumors is that the majority are lightly pigmented or contain no pigment at all. They lack the dark, recognizable features of a skin melanoma, effectively blending in with the surrounding tissue. Because of this lack of pigment, these tumors are frequently misidentified during a visual exam. They resemble epidermoid carcinomas, as well as simple warts or harmless thrombotic piles. This map illustrates how anal melanoma spreads systemically. It moves through rectal mucosal layers using inferior mesenteric nodes to bypass local lymph defenses. Entering the bloodstream, it reaches the liver and lungs relatively early in the disease's progression. Unlike other anal tumors, melanoma is uniquely radioresistant and does not respond well to chemotherapy. Because these standard oncological tools are ineffective, surgeons must move immediately to radical abdominoperineal resection to have any chance of stopping the spread. Since this tumor resists most chemical and radiological treatments, time is the critical factor. Any delay in diagnosis allows the cancer to move systemically, which is why the 5-year survival rate remains around 15%, even in specialized institutions. The spectrum of pathology in the anal canal is vast, ranging from localized viral warts that can be treated with topical acids to aggressive melanomas that bypass local defenses. The core challenge for clinicians is that these biologically distinct conditions share the same early signs. Minor itching and bleeding are the universal indicators for both the benign and the lethal. The outcome for the patient depends entirely on which point of the spectrum is being treated. The response can range from a simple chemical application to a life-altering radical resection of the pelvic tissue. In this anatomical region, symptoms cannot be taken at face value. Early, aggressive diagnostics and multiple tissue biopsies form the only reliable way to distinguish a minor infection from a life-threatening malignancy.
If you found this video informative, please like and share, comment what you would like to see next, and subscribe to the channel to get notified about future informative videos.